I appreciate all the comments that people have made about watching, those are very encouraging. It's nice to know that we're reaching people. We do get emails every now and then. Somebody will send me an email, or I've got a phone call one day from a lady out west in Western United States and said, I watched your prophecy update and I got saved. And I'm like, I'm not sure how that happened. I didn't even remember specifically doing the gospel in that particular update. But she then told me, she says, listen, I've been a Roman Catholic nun for 35 years. I've resigned from my order. I've left the Roman Catholic Church and I'm a Christian for the first time in my life. So got a call from a friend of hers who had just moved to the East Coast, and she said she had accepted the Lord that week also watching the prophecy update. So I have no idea. Sometimes we figure we have to be very slick and wonderful in our presentation, and sometimes I think we forget that the Holy Spirit is able to overcome any foibles that we have. So some people might criticize Mark for hardcore street preaching, and it's like God can use all sorts of different ways to bring people to the Lord, and He's the one who does all the final work anyway. We just have to get the message out there. So
praise God and not kick the habit.
So in any event, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm not sure which direction I want to go right now. I might do a short prophecy update thing because it touches on some of the things that Jacob talked about. And then I want to talk about Israel. I'm trying to decide which one I want to do. I think I'm going to start with Israel. And then, by then you'll have forgotten what Jacob said, since some of it is repetitive, and you'll learn. By the way, I've always wanted to do this. If I could take just like 2 or 3 minutes. Is anyone here from Scotland? Okay, stand up. I want to ask you a couple questions. So I'm going to give you an example of how a lawyer conducts an examination to get to a point, okay? So it's not going to be difficult. Yes or no answers will be fine. You're from Scotland. And I understand Scotland is a very proud country, very proud of its heritage and culture. Is that correct? And one of the things that's important in Scotland is it considers itself to be the home of golf. Is that right? Yes. And in fact, the governing body there is called the Royal and Ancient Club in St. Andrews, if I recall, right? And so that people in Scotland are very appreciative of golf and golfing achievements. Is that right? Okay. And they consider them historical and even tied into sort of a religious experience. So that's all. I don't have any more questions for you. So listen, this is, I don't often say this. My wife is back there holding her ears because she's heard it a million times. One Sunday morning, a friend of mine, we skipped church and we went to play golf. The big tournament at Muirfield Village was across the river. And I had and I'm a very avid golfer. I play every week, at least once. Except when I come to England and stay at a hotel on a golf course, then I don't play. So I figured, do the math on that. But second hole was 175 yards uphill into a pretty stiff wind. I hit a 6-iron. Ball hit about 10 feet from the hole and rolled in for a hole-in-one. Then there was a short par 4. Then the fourth hole was a par 3 downwind, a little downhill. Pin was behind a trap. I took the same club, the same ball. I told my friend, don't aim at the pin. I didn't aim at the pin, but I mishit it. It flew directly at the pin, just cleared a sand trap, took one bounce, hit the flagstick, and dropped in for another hole-in-one. So I've had 2 in my life, so I had 2. And so I've often told the story. Really, I have told it often. You would too. Don't kid yourselves. That if I had done that in Scotland, that they would have written like a hymn or an epic poem about it. Sort of like Beowulf or something, right? Am I right? I'm not overstating the case, am I? Okay. I'll be sure to tell all my golf friends. I'm going to get them this year for our New Year's Eve party. I'm going to get them little laminated cards with the story so they get the facts straight. Okay. A world of intense chaos. is the way that I would describe the things that are going on. And I'm going to talk about the cultural things first. Then I'm going to do a little bit about Israel. I have considered, I've talked to some people about organizing a tour. We have a lady in church, if you would be interested. And I'll talk about it when I talk about the Israel part of my talk tonight. But what I would want to do is more along the lines of what Jacob does in his tours, because I've seen videos of those, is the teaching about the site. If you want to get a flavor for how I view it, I do a teaching. One of my favorites is on Ezekiel chapter 23, Oholah and Oholivah. It's on the internet. There's many copies of it. I try to do it once a year, tying in the story in Ezekiel chapter 23 about the two harlot sisters representing the northern and southern kingdom, and tie that into the geography of Israel, the divided kingdom, and what went on at Tel Dan. It's one of my favorite teachings because it ties history and geography in Israel and the Bible and prophecy and everything together. So you might look that up, but that would give you a flavor that I do. And one of my concerns about the tours of Israel, last year we were there, we went to the Friends of Zion Museum, which is well done. But we went into the map room. I don't know have you been to the Friends of Zion Museum? A few of you have. And what they do, they have sort of what I would call Disney type rooms, sort of interactive, talking statues and that type of thing. But one of the parts of the tour, you go into a room in Israel, or you go into a room and you're standing on a map of Israel. And it shows you, it takes you on a quick tour of Israel. But what they do is they do what most Christian tours do. Not what Jacob does, or not what I would do if I led a tour. You start in Tel Aviv, you go to Caesarea Philippi, you go to Caesarea on the Mediterranean, then you go up to Mount Carmel, then you go to Megiddo, you go to maybe Nazareth, you go to the Sea of Galilee, you go up to the Golan, Tel Dan, Caesarea Philippi, you come down through the Jordan Valley, you take the boat ride across the Sea of Galilee, you take Beit Shan, go down through the Jordan Valley to Masada, to Qumran, and then you come back up to Jerusalem, and then you go back to Tel Aviv. And the problem with that is this. That's not what I consider to be the real biblical Israel. I have it. Here it is. This would be the typical itinerary on a tour of Israel. But what do you miss? You miss the mountains of Israel, the biblical heartland. So a year ago, some friends gave us a trip to Israel, gave us their apartment in Jerusalem for about 10 days. We were there when Trump was there, and it was sort of chaotic. So that day we went up to the Golan and across along the Lebanon border to the Mediterranean. But what we did was we spent most of our time in the mountains of Israel, visiting. That is the biblical heartland. And I was, having been to Israel a couple times before, and then going on this tour and going with an archaeologist, Joel Kramer, to these sites, it upset me because of you miss so much of the biblical heartland of Israel. We went to, and I'll talk about Shechem in a moment, we went to Samaria, we went to Bethel, we went to Ai, we went to Jericho. And what's happened in evangelicalism, unfortunately, is that a lot of evangelical pastors and whatnot, and the tourism industry in Israel, as far as I'm concerned, have capitulated to the lies of the biblical archaeologists. Biblical archaeologists being sort of the people, it's sort of like, biblical archaeologists to me is sort of like atheist pastor. They don't believe in the Bible. They make stories up. They reinvent their timelines and their history and their excavations. I'll give you an example. Our guide, Joel Kramer, has been over there doing digs and archaeology for about 12 years. So he's become a bit of an expert about it. He's participated in many areas. And he told us that he went to Jericho. Now, we went to Jericho when we were there. There's a cafe there, the Paradise Cafe, I think it's called. We met the owner. He's a friend of Joel's. They call him the King of Jericho. If you ever need anything done in Jericho, go to this guy. And we were there for a couple of hours, and I would estimate that through the parking lot, the restaurant was a zoo. There were 40, 50 people in line at the buffet the whole time we were there. And of those 200 buses, so here, there's the restaurant, there's the parking lot, and then there's the Tell of Jericho, ancient Jericho. How many buses do you think took the time to go to the Tell at Jericho, which was as close as the back of this room? One. One group of 12 people went on the Tell at Jericho. Because Kathleen Kenyon, the archaeologist who excavated it, and I was told this back in 1973 or 4 when I took biblical archaeology in college by a guy who actually did archaeology in the summer in Israel, that they were going to change the narrative about Jericho because Jericho was too difficult for the archaeologists to integrate into their timelines that denied the existence of the Jewish people in the Holy Land at that time. So our friend Joel Kramer says he went to Jericho, he went over on a part of the Tell where the Italians were digging, and he found some pottery. Now, Joel's very good at pottery. There are people that have the gift, they can walk through a field and they'll say, oh, look, there's a 4-leaf clover over there. They have that special gift. So you would be walking down and you would see stones on the path and you go, oh, look at the pieces of pottery over there. And we're like, it looks like stones, Joel. He says, oh no, this is early bronze or late bronze pottery. You can tell the way it's fired. He would pick up a piece that was a handle or a piece of a handle. And it was like this every Tell that we went to. But he found pottery and digging there in the one of the layers there at Jericho, and he took it to his professor. His professor is the world's leading expert on late bronze pottery. Late bronze is the period of the conquest, the period of the Exodus and the conquest by Jericho, by Joshua. So he said to his professor, he says, I brought you some pottery to look at. Tell me, what period is it from? And his professor said, where did you find it? And Joel says, I'm not going to tell you where I found it. Well, why won't you tell me where you found it? Because if I tell you where I found it, you'll change your opinion. He says, well, I'm not going to tell you what I think it is until you tell me where you found it. So I found it at Jericho over where the Italians are digging. And he goes, well, you can never quote me and I'll deny it. It's late bronze pottery, which means that it's tied to the period of the conquest when they claim that there was nobody there. And so you see bus after bus after bus of evangelical pastors that come through there who are convinced that there's nothing there for anybody to see. And when you walk on the Tell, you learn a tremendous amount of history that's there. The same thing happens up at near Bethel. There's no one there. And in fact, when we went to these sites at Jericho, Pam, Joel, and I, we went to Bethel, Pam, Joel, and I. We went to Shiloh. We saw a couple from the Netherlands walking off the Tell. Otherwise, it was Pam, Joel, and I. We went to Shechem, Pam, Joel, and I. We were the only people at these sites that are in the biblical heartland that are referenced in Scripture that are clearly the historical archaeological sites. And in my view, it is a crime. So if I ever do a tour, and if you're interested, you can find my email on the fbchapel.com website. Send me an email that you're interested. I have talked to someone about and my wife is going, I have no idea what he's talking about because he's not cleared this with me. But see, now I do it in public and she can't turn me down. So, but she still may. But if the Lord works it out, we would like to do that, and we would like to go to some of these sites. Some of them are difficult. That's why I'll talk about Shechem a little bit tonight, because it's difficult to get to. But Hebron, Shiloh, these are accessible sites, and nobody goes there. Having been there, it drives me insane that people don't. And evangelical pastors, when we went there in 1995, We stopped at the Paradise Cafe, and I thought, we're going to go over to Jericho because you could see the burn layer and the collapsed mud brick, because I've seen Kathleen Kenyon's charts. And our pastor said, well, we got to get on the bus. We got to get up to Beit Shan. Well, some people think that's Jericho, but other people don't. So let's get on the bus. And that's what it was. It's what's happened is the church has lost its connection to the Jewish. It's unhitched from the Jewish scriptures and the Jewish land. And these are the rich biblical sites. So if you go to I don't have any pictures of it. It says in Joshua, is unoccupied to this day. And there's nothing there. There's a lovely neighborhood of homes that you might see in a very upscale neighborhood like Beverly Hills in the Los Angeles area. Very lovely homes. And the other thing I noticed too is wherever we went in Judea and Samaria, what they improperly call the West Bank, they don't call Jordan the East Bank, but that's another topic. As we went to these sites, there are these beautiful homes, neighborhoods around these sites, and there was nobody there. Ever. The neighborhoods are empty. This led me to the conclusion, and after reading great work by Ambassador Yorm Ettinger, and Caroline Glick of the Jerusalem Post, and her book, The Israeli Solution, the demographic problem that they keep saying, we can't have a one-state solution because the Palestinians would outpopulate the Jews and the Jewish character. This is nonsense. The Palestinian demographics are way overstated. Go read Yorm Ettinger's blog. Very easy to find. This is a myth that's been created. So we go to We walk up on the Tell. We had gone to Bethel. You can't see Bethel because had to cover it over. But Joel pulled out his book. This is a late bronze wall. This is how in the late bronze period they built the walls. Every archaeologist on planet Earth agrees that wall at Bethel, at this site that they excavated, was a late bronze wall. There is no disagreement. Is about 2 miles directly to the east. We walked up to the Tell. We went to the excavation trench. And he said, what kind of wall is that? And it was clear. You don't even have to be an expert. We just looked at it 2 miles away. Took us 10 minutes to drive over there. It's a late bronze wall. Every archaeologist in the world denies that that's a late bronze wall. Same layer 2 miles away. When they excavated, it tells us in Joshua, when they killed the king of Ai, they threw his body into the temple area and they heaped stones over that area. Now, the stones are gone because they excavated. When they excavated Ai, over the temple area in Ai, just like the Bible said, they found a pile of stones about 30 meters long and 8 meters high, 25 feet high and 90 feet long. Right where the Bible said it should be. And there's pictures of it, there's photographic proof, and yet people deny that this is the biblical city. It happens all the time. So this is the Israel that I love. It's a fascinating topography. This is a graphic that I found. Actually, I found this on a Mormon website. So I will give you that caution if you go looking for it. Use the graphics, don't stay for the theology, okay? But it gives you an idea of how the land of Israel is organized from the lowest part on earth, the shore of the Dead Sea, about 1,300 feet below sea level. As you go north, the Sea of Galilee is about 700 feet below sea level. And then it goes up to Lake Hula into the Golan Heights area, and then Mount Hermon, which is almost 10,000 feet above sea level. So you can see there's rather dramatic rise. And that why the Golan Heights is so important. The Golan Heights is in this area here, and it's the high ground. It would be crazy for Israel to give this up. And just so to verify what Jacob said, there was a vote yesterday in the UN on resolution, it was agenda item 55. I believe this is the one, the occupied Golan. Nope, here it is, right here. The occupied Syrian Golan, this is the resolution that the UN General Assembly voted on just yesterday in New York City. And the vote, here you can see what some of the resolution says, calls upon Israel, the occupying power, to comply with the relevant resolutions on the occupied Syrian Golan. We're over 50 years now since Israel took it over. Decided that the Israeli decision to impose its laws, jurisdiction, and administration on the occupied Syrian Golan was null and void and without international legal effect. It demanded that Israel, the occupying power, rescind forthwith its decision. Also calls upon Israel to desist from changing the physical character, demographic composition, institutional structure, and legal status of the occupied Syrian Golan and to resist the establishment of the settlements. By the way, the UN considered 9 resolutions the other day that were all anti-Israel. UN Watch, Hillel Nauer, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who runs that UN Watch, said these are the anti-country resolutions, the negative resolutions for a particular country that are being considered by the UN General Assembly over the next couple of weeks. So you see this, Iran, 1. Syria, 500,000 to 1 million dead. 16 million people displaced, 1. North Korea, 1. US, 1. I'm not sure what it is we did. I'm surprised there's only 1 for us. Israel, 20. 9 of them came to a vote yesterday. There was one on this, of course, the Golan. And here's the voting result. I just pulled away. We were sitting up here. I pulled it off the UN website. I want to make sure I've got the numbers right. Yeah, agenda item 55. The vote was 153 to 5. And the U.S. voted in favor of this. Or against the resolution. It was the first time that we've ever done that. Now, there's been a lot of controversy. There's been a lot of push by the Israeli government to get the United States to recognize Israeli sovereignty over the Golan. It's a very important thing. This is Ezekiel 38-39 territory, the part of it. And Israel is not going to give up this territory without a fight. They are very concerned that Russian patrols are taking place along the Syrian border now. They brought some of the UN troops back in. Now, I don't think Israel is very concerned about UN troops, except that UN troops have a tendency to sexually abuse women and children when they get into certain areas. So that's what you'd be afraid of when UN troops come into your neighborhood, is lock up your kids and your women, because there's a lot of sexual abuse going on there. But they wanted, they pressed John Bolton to recognize, and Nikki Haley to recognize the Israeli control over the Golan, but the U.S. has resisted that. But you always look for these little nuggets of change in the policy, and the nugget of change in the policy, as Jacob rightly pointed out, is that for the first time the U.S. voted against a resolution like this. In the past, the U.S. for 50 years has abstained from those voting in favor or against those resolutions. So this is great news. One of the other ones was about the return of the persons displaced as a result of the June 67 and subsequent hostilities. And it says the UN reaffirms the right of all persons displaced as a result of the June 1967 and subsequent hostilities to return to their homes or former places of residence in the territories occupied by Israel since 1967. And I would say, based on what we observed when we were there last year, there's nobody living there anyway, so I don't know who's coming back. They've just been putting up these, and let me tell you, you can find it on YouTube. You go to Mount Gerizim, I think if you go to type in Mount Gerizim Mansion, there's a guy, you can see it, if you look down onto Nablus, you can see the Balata refugee camp, very densely populated, a horrible place. Then you turn around or you go down just a little bit further and you look the opposite direction and there's this incredible, it looks like something that a Roman emperor would build, this massive house. It's a multi-billionaire Palestinian, big supporter of Yasser Arafat, and he has this phenomenal home. So here it is, these people live in squalor, and literally a mile away or a mile and a half away is one of the most ornate, elaborate homes I have ever seen in my life. Something doesn't square there. And I was told this is the richest man in the West Bank, is what we were told when we were there. And my reaction was, he must sell security fencing to the Israelis, because there's a lot of security fencing. So this resolution about the displaced Palestinian refugees, it's voted against, in favor 161, against 2, the United States and Israel. I am very grateful. I live in a country that supports Israel. Now, I've been criticized for saying that I support Israel, that I would even call myself a Christian Zionist. I've taken on some forums where I've said this on a program or an interview. I've gotten a lot of heat about it. And my response is, I don't agree with everything Israel does. Please be clear about that. I think they should have bombed Iran 10 years ago. Okay, so see, I disagree with Israeli policy. So, the Defense Minister Lieberman, he resigned, as Jacob noted. There's a lot of things going on. The people in the Gaza Strip are very upset because they don't like having 500 rockets. This was the heaviest rocket attack ever from Gaza. Now, the rockets aren't necessarily very effective, but some of them did have some range, and there's some indication that there's a little bit more sophisticated rocket technology being used. And it's clear that this was an Iranian-prompted thing. And the concern always is, one concern, this was a report, I don't know how valid this report is, that Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as we call him, the MBS had insisted that Israel should go to war and invade Gaza. Why? Well, because he wants to distract attention away from all the investigations going on about him. The CIA, our CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, released a report just this morning or yesterday evening that said that they believe that the attack that killed this Khashoggi, the journalist Khashoggi, what a joke that is. The guy was a supporter of Osama bin Laden. He was a propagandist. He was not a good guy. Now, I don't necessarily mean that he should be tortured and killed for that, but the fact of the matter is he was not a good guy. And when was the last time that we didn't worry about Arab Emirates assassinating people in their country? It happens all the time. And we shouldn't be surprised about MBS. When he came into his office as Crown Prince a little over a year ago, what did he do? He immediately rounded up a bunch of rich people, and there are good reports, solid reports. He tortured them and extorted billions of dollars from them. One of which was a person who held dual citizenship in Saudi Arabia and Lebanon, named Hariri, who is the prime minister or president of Lebanon. Very wealthy man. He was held there. He resigned. You remember seeing the video of him resigning? He was held under house arrest in Saudi Arabia till he resigned, and he read that. And the word is that once he had paid about $7 billion to MBS, or however he transferred the money, he was then allowed to go back home, to which he assumed his office again. So listen, this is no surprise that MBS would do this, but I'm very concerned that President Trump, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, have spent a lot of time making nice with this particular individual. I trusting the Saudis is an enterprise doomed to failure, in my opinion, eventually. But this was one guy that was assassinated. There are 500,000 to 1 million people dead in Syria, and the media never talks about that. Done under the Iranians. Now, there's a lot of theories. Oh, the U.S. is doing this. We're bombing. Listen, the Syrian cities have been cleared out of Sunni Arabs, Sunni Muslim Arabs. They have been clear-cut, if you will, by carpet bombing, by barrel bombing those neighborhoods. You've seen the pictures of Syria. The cities are destroyed. The prophecy that says that Isaiah 17, Damascus will be destroyed, large chunks of it are, well, if it's all of Damascus that has to be destroyed, a large part of it is already gone. These cities are rubble. I mean, it's just block after block, mile after mile. A friend of mine, Mark Van Niekerk from South Africa, was recently in Mosul and was putting some pictures on his Facebook page. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what has gone on there. Do you hear the media a hue and cry? No, but a so-called, I'll sound like President Trump now, a fake journalist gets killed in Saudi Arabia, and the world is in meltdown. It's front page news. It's been going on for over a month now. And why? What's the reason? Because they can go after President Trump on this. That's solely what's going on with this. And that's not to say I think MBS or Khashoggi are good guys. The fact of the matter is they're both bad people. And sometimes you just have to make alliances with people who aren't so good. So there are protests in Gaza. Netanyahu's been facing a lot of heat at home about not going in and finishing off Gaza. Even the Dry Bones cartoon got into this today, the Gaza Gambit. Iran activates its puppets in Gaza to draw Israel into a war on our southern border. And then it says, and then we'll get attacked by Iran's puppets on our northern border. Persia invented chess, but the Jews have always been grandmasters, and now it's our move. That's a very wise humor cartoon. A lot of truth there. And this is exactly what Caroline Glick, if you have access to Facebook, there is a person who does Israeli video network. His name is Avi Abelo, Abelow. And for a long time, he was doing a weekly interview with Melanie Phillips and also with Caroline Glick. His friend Ari Fold was stabbed and killed a couple months ago now. In fact, I saw that Ari's daughter is now engaged, who gave such a passionate eulogy at her father's funeral. It was quite moving. But so Avi kind of backed off for a little bit, but now he interviewed Caroline the other day. You can find the video on Facebook. And Caroline essentially said, look, going into Gaza, there's a couple things to be concerned about. As Jacob noted, going into Gaza would be very, very difficult under these circumstances. Gaza is densely populated. It would be street to street, alley to alley, door to door, inside door to inside door combat. Most estimates are that several thousand or more IDF soldiers would be killed in such an invasion. That comes at great cost in a small country like Israel. The country only has a population of 8 or 9 million. And losing several thousand soldiers would be this. But the other point that Caroline made, which I think is more important and which is brought out in this cartoon, is that the concern is that this is a diversion by Iran. It's a test by Iran to see how Israel reacts to a massive rocket attack, even though the rockets aren't that effective. Because up on the Lebanon border, Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets, many of which have advanced guidance systems that they don't have in Gaza, and it would be a much more difficult thing. And so there, historically, if you look back in 2006 or so, the Gaza incursion that took place back in those days was followed about 3 weeks later, less than 3 weeks later, by the 2006 Lebanon War. So that's a concern that the Lebanon war may follow on the heels of this, given the Iranian buildup. And we're now a couple months or more away into a quiet season where Israel has apparently not been attacking targets within Syria. Iran's moving missile technology in there, manufacturing facilities. Russia has their S-300s there. And as many newspapers noted this week, this is a very difficult position that Prime Minister Netanyahu is in. He's tried to have a relationship with Putin, and Putin seems to be backing away from that. And it's very difficult for Prime Minister Netanyahu. And now what do we have? We have sort of political chaos taking place in Israel. Lieberman is pulling his small group out of the coalition. The coalition just barely had a majority anyway in the Israeli Knesset. And Naftali Bennett wanted the defense minister portfolio. Netanyahu considered that. A report I just read a short time ago was that they could not point Naftali Bennett as the new defense minister to replace Lieberman, because if they appointed Naftali, because of other people in the coalition don't like Naftali Bennett, and they would pull out of the coalition. So what do you have? So you have Hamas, supported by the Iranians, launch missiles and rocket barrage I've never before seen against Israel. And now you have this situation where the Israelis they don't know what to do, and now their government is falling apart, and they'll have to have early elections. And it's anybody's guess how that's actually going to play out. It's a very precarious situation. And it goes to show you that the world we live in, as we've talked about this week in some of our talks, as we get closer to the end, the prophetically declared events converge. They get closer. There's an acceleration. And it creates almost like a vortex and a tornado, and things get very, very turbulent in the world and very intense. And I'm personally of the mind, I have no doubt that this intensity that we're seeing build up in everywhere you look, Merkel not running again for re-election, Macron, trying to cobble together a European army. His approval ratings are at 29%. Even though The Economist puts on the cover that he can walk on water, it's incredibly chaotic. The elections in the U.S. that are apparently still going on, they're finding ballots in Broward County in trunks of rental cars at Fort Lauderdale Airport. I don't know of a third world country that handles their elections as badly as the U.S. appears to, at least South Florida. This happens all the time. Somebody asked me a question once, about what does it take to register to vote in Ohio? I said, well, you have to do this, this, and this. And I said, you're in Chicago, you can register to vote even if you're dead. So, and there's good evidence. They might have a number of precincts. They have, say, 500 registered voters, and they had 850 people vote in that particular precinct. It's math only a Democrat could love. So Caroline has a good article in yesterday's Jerusalem Post. She has a Friday column there on the last page. You can find it each week. I highly recommend that you read her. Melanie Phillips as well. I went to see Melanie Phillips was in Ohio and spoke this past summer. Don't agree with her on everything, but she's a very clear-headed thinker. In fact, she spoke at a large church. Pastor Alistair Begg likes her, reads her all the time, and invited her to come to Parkside Church in Cleveland area to speak. So we drove up, and there were probably 4,000 people or so in the auditorium that night. It's a very large church. And I have to tell you that she was more clear-headed on truth and what's wrong in our culture and world than most evangelical pastors I hear. It's shocking. I would that it would not be that way. but it appears to be. So here's what Caroline says, concluding her article. What is clear enough is that Israel's enemies are sitting on our borders in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza, and they are watching us and our general staff. And she's very critical of the IDF, which seems to be not wanting to go into things. In fact, there's tremendous parallels between what goes on in America and Israel. And I think sometimes what goes on here in the UK and Israel, the sort of chaos, the press, the attacks by the press, the ruling political class that doesn't seem to care what the people think. Your government is falling apart. You know that. And the words, I'm sure, I pray that the words that you don't want to hear are the words that I don't want to hear. Prime Minister Jeremy Corbyn. That would be a disaster. Somebody said, don't even speak it. So I don't want that to happen for you, because that man he hates Jews. He is a despicable human being. I read articles about him. I use him as an example. You've seen him use him as examples in my prophecy update, because he's indicative of the way the world is and the way it feels about Israel. So, but what happens in Israel is the same thing that's happening in our military. Our military is really in a bad state of decline, by the way. The reports that I read, that I get sent by people connected to the defense industry, are shocking. In the hurricane that took place down in Florida recently, they had a bunch of F-22 stealth fighters that were destroyed because they were left in their hangars at the Air Force Base. And everybody says, why didn't they fly them away? And the real answer, I believe, is they weren't capable of flying. There's a complete lack of, in fact, they're going to aircraft museums to take parts off mothballed stealth bombers so that the ones we have can fly. It's a major problem. I mean, the Obama administration decimated our military. And listen, I play golf every Saturday with a retired 2-star Air Force general. I know what I'm talking about. We talk about this all the time. It's very concerning. We have a lot of firepower. We got a lot of nice toys, but we have been in a state of decline for 8 years or more. And our military is worn out because of Afghanistan, which we are now 17 years into, Iraq. None of these are going well, and these multiple deployments, we're just wearing our military people out. So I don't know that I would count on us as the great superpower of the world, but the other problem is that a lot of the battle decisions are now made by lawyers. Now, you would think that a lawyer would say, well, that's what's wrong with having lawyers involved in more things. And the answer to that is, what's wrong with that is having lawyers involved in more things. Because now the decisions are made based on what international law may or may not provide, and whether the people that are making these decisions, the generals and whatnot, are going to get charged with war crimes in the International Criminal Court. The same thing is happening, the exact same thing, as Caroline notes it in her article, is happening in Israel. Lawyers are making all these battle decisions in Israel for the IDF. And they're not accountable to people. And I work with lawyers, okay? I are one. And I don't want lawyers making those decisions. But they are. So she concludes her article with this. H hour passed when the missile landed on the bus on Monday. You remember the Israeli soldiers, the bus was hit by a missile just after 50 soldiers had miraculously, providentially exited the bus. There were 2 relatively minor injuries. They would all have been killed if they'd been on the bus. It's one of those tourist buses a lot of you have been on. If we aren't prepared, Caroline says, to mow the lawn in Gaza and Lebanon today, then we need to fix what is broken here at home today, because tomorrow they will strike us again, and tomorrow we may not have the option of walking away. And that's very wise. In my opinion, if Netanyahu goes, I'll vote. If I was there, I would vote for Caroline Glick for prime minister. We got to meet her a few years ago. I was going to a conference where she was speaking, and I thought, boy, I really would like to just say hello and thank you. And we're sitting in a restaurant before she spoke, and she walked in and sat down at the table right next to us. So that was providential. So let's just look at a couple of the prophecy things. Then I'll talk about Shechem briefly, and we'll get you at least back to your room before checkout tomorrow morning. This is where people from Paradise, California, are now living. Fields and fields full of people. 27,000 people displaced in a state where there's a housing shortage already. These people's lives have been totally upended by this fire, the worst fire in California history. As I think I mentioned this morning, they've raised the number missing or unaccounted for to over 1,000. The death toll keeps rising, and it's hard though because the people were essentially cremated in their cars. So they're finding, it's like, is that a rock or a piece of bone that's left from a human being? And a lot of them died in their cars. So this is, there are a lot of theories about, is this caused by the government and that sort of thing. I'm always concerned when I hear these theories because because by doing these theories and saying that some evil persons did it, we discount the fact that it might be God's judgment. And I'm concerned that we seem to have all sorts of explanations as for why it can't be God's judgment when it really may be God's judgment. If there's any state that, and we have family in California, but if there's any state that deserves it in the United States, it's that state for the things that they're doing and the things they're enacting. The transgender LGBTQ agenda, pushing it on young kids in schools, telling people that disagree that they need to shut up. One of the leading countries doing this is Facebook. Facebook is under a lot of fire now for selling information. In fact, this was the front page of the New York Times. Delay, deny, deflect. How Facebook leaders leaned out in crisis. And they're under attack. And they should be because of the things that they're doing. And they're shutting down conservative voices. I've been banned at times from Facebook for a prophecy update. And I know that Facebook is limiting the reach of posting about, I have a new prophecy update up. But this is an interesting editorial. In a newspaper yesterday, Facebook cannot be trusted. Do you know what newspaper published this? The New York Times. See, sometimes the left has to even police themselves. They get a little bit too extreme. Here's an interesting article, a Pew Research Center. New Age beliefs common among both religious and non-religious Americans. And I talked a bit about this, about mysticism and spiritual formation. This is bringing New Age mysticism, Hindu mysticism, Eastern mysticism into the church. And do you think it's been effective? Look at what this survey says. 60%, 6 in 10 Christians hold at least one New Age belief of this. They believe spiritual energy can be located in physical things. Do you think what Jacob talked about today was not important? It's critically important. Believe in psychics, believe in reincarnation, believe in astrology. 62% of all U.S. adults believe that, hold to one of those beliefs. 61% of Christians hold to one of those four beliefs. That should be shocking. Well, maybe not. Maybe when influential pastors are talking about unhitching from the Jewish scriptures and the Bible, we have a clear path to identify the source of the problem. But very few pastors will talk about it. I talk about it. It's something that I'm passionate about. Somebody said, when did you first meet Jacob? It was 2004. at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. You know what my reaction was? Where have you been all my life? Because I felt a kindred spirit and connection with this man that's only grown over the years. You think spirituality problems are not bad, this mysticism? Here's an interesting article. Oprah Powell and spirituality guru plans 2020 run. Marianne Williamson, who wrote A Course in Miracles that was pushed by Oprah Winfrey. Is Oprah Winfrey very popular here in... the devotion that she seems to inspire. Marianne Williamson, New Age guru, A Course in Miracles, is thinking of running for president in 2020. Now, of the United States. And this election is going to bring, well, it's already started. We just had the midterms, and they're already talking about what's going to happen in 2 years. Pray for us in the U.S. I live in a county, a state, a county, a town, and a precinct that is considered to be one of the probably top 10 swing areas in the country. Our phone rings all the time. Now our cell phones ring all the time. Surveys, ads, all of this stuff. Our Governor Kasich is thinking about running for president too. Now I want to make some disqualifiers here so you don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I subscribe to a lot of publications, as I think it's important to get a broad sense of what's going on. One of them that I subscribe to is The Economist. It's published by, I think it's owned by the Rothschild family. And so it's very influential in the finance world. It does have some what I would consider to be inside information that you might not get someplace else. Each year, around November 30th, they publish a magazine that's called The World in the Next Year. So back in November of 2015, when Obama was still in office, they published The World in 2016. And usually I don't want to say it's not a prophecy on their cover. It's sort of their prediction as to where things are going to go. And you can get a kind of a clue where the financial elites think things are going to go in the next year. So I always find that it's interesting because it does, at least watching it for the last 4 or 5 years, it does seem to be somewhat accurate in telling us how things are going to go. So you can see the pictures here. You can see the Saudi Prince Khalid there. You see Pope John Paul II. You see Putin. Of course, you see David Cameron, but he's gone. Obama, Hillary Clinton. This was leading up to the elections in the U.S. The one person I don't think that you do see on there is Donald Trump, as I don't think he's on that. So a year later, we've had the elections in the United States, and The Economist publishes The World in 2017. And here we see this. And they're tarot type cards, and it's called Planet Trump. Trump's been elected. What's he going to do? And there's a lot of symbolism in what they thought was going to happen. And you can interpret that cover, but I just showed you how we go from a rather busy cover to a less busy cover. And it's focused on essentially one person. In 2018, it was just computer icons. And I think it was sort of tipping us off that the rise of artificial intelligence and the importance of computers and the Internet of Things was going to be important in the coming year. And has that proved to be true? It certainly has. So what do they think the world in 2019 is going to be like? What is their cover? It was just released the other day. It's black. Now take that for what you think. But I often say this in my prophecy updates. When the secular world is talking about things that appear to line up directly in line with Bible prophecy, you ought to wake up and take notice as to what's going on. And so here we are, now it's black. So it goes from the tarot type cards to the computer icons to black. Now, I don't know what that means. I really don't. I will tell you that we live in a very dark world. One of the beloved pop stars in the world is Celine Dion. You know, some people don't think she's that talented. I happen to like her music. But I want to show you where she's going. I don't know if you've seen this. This is her new ad for a children's line of gender-neutral clothing. Watch the symbolism in this.
It's okay, it's okay. I'm Celine Dion.
Our children, they are not really our children,
As we are all just links in a never-ending chain
that is life.
For us, they are everything. But in reality, we are only a fraction of their universe. We miss the past.
They dream of tomorrow.
We may thrust them forward into the future, but the course will always be theirs to choose.
See how the clothes have changed?
I can't believe they called security. I mean, oh, come on, I'm Celine Dion. I'm not spending the night in jail. Holy shit.
Guys, relax, easy. I'm Celine Dion.
Yeah, girl, and I'm Beyonce.
I'm calling my agent.
So I went through the catalog, and this is an infant sleeper. This is an infant sleeper. You know, that we live in 2 Peter chapter 2. Well, in Luke chapter 17, Jesus tells us that an indicator of the end times, it will be a pattern that we should look for is it will be as in the days of Lot. And 2 Peter chapter 2 tells us that Lot was oppressed by the behavior, the licentious behavior going on around him. So I often say, if what you see bothers you, that's a good check on where you stand with the Lord. Because Lot was distressed by what he saw. This bothers me. I mean, I have, great nieces and nephews that are infants. They're 3 months old. Giving with a skull on it. And we can't tell the difference. We can't come out and say the difference between men and women. Dennis Prager, a Jewish commentator in the United States, often says that the problem in modern culture, he's conservative, he's not saved, but he has a little bit of light because he's very tied to the scripture, whether he's interpreting it correctly. But he said, and he says stuff that evangelical pastors don't say, and he says, listen, they always say that if you're born gay, you're born lesbian or bisexual, and you can't change. Your sexual orientation cannot be changed. But your biological gender can be changed. That shows how messed up, twisted, upside down the world is. It is, as I said today, intense chaos. An example of this is campus sexual assault rules. Trump has come out with regulations that want to change the definition of the word sex back to what the original legislation meant for sex discrimination. Because Obama said, well, they said sex, so that could mean anything we want it to mean. That's how postmoderns and leftists and liberals interpret things. And so we'll just say sex means LGBTQ, transgender, sexual orientation, and that. But that's not what the legislation meant originally. So Trump's tried to put that back, and everybody's going crazy. And now they have these sexual assault rules that have essentially the men who are charged with sexual assault on college campuses in the U.S., if the school is receiving federal funds, they cannot cross-examine their witnesses. They can't even find out sometimes who's accusing them. And so Betsy DeVos and Trump have come out with new regulations to do this, and the left is going crazy. Do I have proof? Here's the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties U tweet the other day. We advocate for fair school disciplinary process that uphold the rights of both parties in campus sexual assault and harassment cases. Today, Secretary DeVos proposed a rule that would tip the scales against those who raise their voices. This is not what happened. She did not propose a rule. She proposed a rule to make the process fair. The world up is down, left is right, right is left, and it's anything goes in our world today. It promotes an unfair process, as the ACLU said, inappropriately favoring the accused and letting schools ignore their responsibility under Title IX to respond promptly to complaints of sexual violence. It's just absolutely crazy. And then I think this is about the last article that I have, the CIA, this is the CIA coming out with the accusations against Crown Prince Khashoggi. So we can stop, or we can, can you give me 10 minutes? Okay. I was going to take it anyway. But by the way, here's a little video that I found of the Golan Heights. This is the Sea of Galilee here, up to the Golan Heights in Mount Hermon. And I think it gives you a very good idea of the lay of the land and why the Golan Heights is so important. I kind of geek out when I see maps and videos like this, and I'm grabbing them off the internet and everything to use. But it kind of gives you the idea as to why the Golan Heights is so important. And the Golan Heights is important. You know, there is one of the places we hope to go in the next few days is the British Museum, National Museum down in London. And these are the found at Tel El Amara in Egypt. They're in the British Museum in London. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they are very important archaeological find. And I first heard about them at Shechem last year in Nablus. We went to Nablus with Joel. He told us, you know, there are these tablets that they found. There's all kinds of tablets that they found that talk about these people. And this is the description. The letters, these tablets, represent the diplomatic correspondence sent by various vassal princes of the Egyptian Empire to the Pharaoh Amenhotep III and some others. I won't say their names because I won't pronounce them correctly. They document a turbulent period when Egypt's preoccupation with domestic policy led to insurrection and instability throughout the empire. What period of time where these come from? They come from the late Bronze period that I've talked about. There was instability in the Egyptian Empire. And the word is, nobody ever talked about the Hebrews. They don't even know that they exist. And, you know, you people, you believe these myths in the Bible, it's all made up. The Amarna letters make reference to the Hapiru people. Hapiru people. And where? Depicted as roving bands of stateless people based in the hill country of Canaan, which you might know today as the mountains of Israel, or if you're somebody who wants to ignore history, you would call it the West Bank. Based in the hill country and conducting raids on cities, these alternative Canaanites form the basis of the biblical Hebrews. And you can find these in your museum, National Museum down in London. And so when you go to, let me move over here to, you should also know, I always have a lot of slides that never make it to my update. I did a talk once at a conference, and the person who was editing the video, like Josh would be, it's like, how do you use 100 slides in a 58-minute talk? And the answer is very simple. I skipped 30 of them because I had 130 slides that you didn't even see, or 30 slides that you didn't see. So we went here in Hebron. These are the steps up to the old city. The oldest staircase found in archaeological antiquity in Hebron today. One of the most divided cities you will ever find. It is a city that is the first place that Abraham purchased land in Israel. And it is a place where he is buried, and there's reference after reference after reference to Hebron in Scripture. I did a talk called Why Hebron Matters. I think I became the subject of a research project at Al-Quds University. I had hundreds of Palestinians, people with Hamas supporter, liking our Facebook page, following us, and that type of thing. Because they saw Hebron. Why? Hebron is very, very important. It's where Abraham is buried. Sarah, Jacob, Leah, Isaac, Rebecca, all buried in this, underneath this structure that Herod built. A phenomenal structure. I'm looking for my picture of it. Well, you can kind of see it in this, and I'm going to cut my... That's Netanyahu. The UN comes in and says, there's no Jewish history here. And this is President or Prime Minister Netanyahu last year at the...
Apparently not. Because in July, UNESCO declared the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron a Palestinian World Heritage Site. That's worse than fake news. That's fake history. Mind you, it's true that Abraham, the father of both Ishmael and Isaac, is buried there. But so too are Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca. Sarah is a Jewish name, by the way. Sarah, Rebecca, and Leah, who just happen to be patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people. Well, you won't read about that in the latest UNESCO report. But if you want to, you can read about it in a somewhat weightier publication. It's called the Bible. I highly recommend it. I hear it even got 4.5 out of 5 stars on Amazon. And it's a great read. I read it every week. Ladies and gentlemen, a moment to be serious. Mr. Secretary General, I very much appreciate your statement that denying Israel's right to exist is anti-Semitism, pure and simple. Now that's important, because for too long, the epicenter of global anti-Semitism has been right here at the UN. And while it may take many years, I'm absolutely confident that the revolution in Israel's ties with individual nations will ultimately be reflected here in this Hall of Nations. I say that because there's also a marked change in the position of some of our key friends. Thanks to President Trump's unequivocal support for Israel in this body, that positive change is gathering force. So thank you, President Trump. Thank you for supporting Israel at the UN. And thank you for your support, Ambassador Nikki Haley. Thank you for speaking the truth about Israel.
And so this the hotel we're staying in down here was built in, the original building was built in 1250. At one point, it was actually owned by Charles Darwin's grandfather. There's actually a room there called the Darwin Room. It's a meeting room in the hotel. For 700 years, at this holy site, this building built by Herod, standing almost exactly as it was, they've added some stuff on the top, almost exactly as it was 2,000 years ago, standing through earthquakes, wars, multiple earthquakes, still solid, still structure, and a memorial to the people who are buried there. Not to worship them, but to remember them and what they meant to Jewish and Christian history, unless you're unhitching your Bible from this. Are we not children of Abraham? How do you learn about Abraham if you don't read the Old Testament? This is nonsense. That's a theological term. It means nonsense. And these steps that go up in the right-hand corner there, they called that the seventh step. For 700 years, that was as far as Jews were allowed to go. Almost as long as that hotel has been standing down there, the building. It changed in 1967 in the Six-Day War. Let me share one more thing. I apologize for keeping you. But in northern Israel, in this hill country, in the valley between Mount Ebal to the east and Mount Gerizim to the west, is a valley. There's a city of Nablus. Within the city of Nablus, it's where most of the Palestinian terrorists come from. In fact, as you drive down the streets of Nablus, every square you come to, you will see something like this. They have pictures of, they have Che Guevara, and they'll have a picture of a Palestinian terrorist smiling in his bombing vest, taken from a picture taken the morning that he went to bomb people in Israel during one of the intifadas. Every intersection is a martyr square. Within that city is Jacob's Well, another place purchased by Jewish people as they lived in that land. The other thing that is shocking to me, I don't know if I have a picture of it or not, as you drive up through the hill country, the mountains of Israel, and the archaeologists and people say, well, there were no Hebrews here. Oh, Haparu, that's not Hebrew. Might sound like it, but you know, it's just a made-up story. Every mountain, every hill, from the top to the bottom, is terraced for farming. You can drive 40 miles up through these mountains, and every hill and mountain is terraced for farming. It shocked me. I had no idea. Why? Because tours don't go there. That's why if I ever do one of these, I want to take people to see this. Because I think it's so faith reaffirming. And Pastor John, he stole my stuff this morning. Because it tells us in Genesis chapter 12 that the first place that Abram came and put up an altar was in Shechem. We were there. I know a lot of Jewish people. You've been to Shechem? We're not allowed to go there. It's too dangerous. It's trouble. So he went there, he built an altar. Here's a little map. Here's a sort of a picture of the ancient tell. There's another one. In Judges chapter 9, and this is what the site looked like the day we were there. There was nobody there. This is an older picture. And Abimelech the son of Jerubbaal went to Shechem in Judges chapter 9 unto his mother's brethren and communed with them all the family of the houses of mother, saying, and then verse 5, and he went unto his father's house at Ophrah and slew his brethren, the sons of Jerubbaal, whatever, being 70 persons upon one stone. Notwithstanding yet Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left, and he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, and all the house of Milo, and went and made Abimelech king by the plain of the pillar that was in Shechem. Back in the 1830s, a German archaeologist excavated Shechem, and they discovered, as you read in Judges, you find that in Shechem there was a temple fortress. And as you walk the tell at Shechem, you will see a place where this is what you would see if you would have been approaching Shechem in the ancient times, walking up to the gates of the city. And as you get into the gates of the city, you would eventually get to this temple area. And it was called a temple fortress. And you go there, and there in the temple area in Shechem, you will see this very wide walls, foundation. And as Joel Kramer said to us, that looks like the walls of a fortress, but it's in the shape of a temple. And this is what it would have looked like back in its day when it was existent there in Shechem. It's a fascinating place. Shechem sits between Mount Gerizim to the left, Mount Ebal to the right. That's where they built the altar. In Deuteronomy chapter 27, Moses said, look, when you go back to the land to remember, go to Shechem. And I want you to divide yourself into two groups. And remember, there were at least probably a couple million people. This was not a small exploratory party. This was the nation of Israel coming back into the land. Go to Shechem, divide, put these tribes on Ebal, these tribes on Mount Gerizim. On Ebal, they built an altar, and I'm pretty sure they found the altar there. You can go see it today if you can get there. Sometimes it's shut down because of, disputations, as Dandy Stanley would say. These tribes, maybe 1 million people or more, shouted the curses. This is what God will do to us if we don't obey him. On Mount Gerizim, they shouted the blessings. So here are these mountains about a mile apart, and you got a couple million people shouting back and forth. I would imagine it was a little bit intimidating to the locals. So the curses on Ebal, the blessings on Mount Gerizim. And there in the temple, remember the passage that said the pillar in the plain of Shechem? And Pastor John referred to this as it's a great passage. And when you can go and see what is there that lines up directly with Scripture, it is so faith reaffirming. I wish everybody could go there. So there in this area where the temple fortress was, do you see the stone there standing up? Now, when they found that stone back in the 1800s, it was actually about 3 times taller than that. It was about 22 feet tall. And they had to break it up, and they didn't really realize what they had. So they went back and they stood it up on the site where they found it. And I'll just read what Pastor John wrote. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and set them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and took a great stone and set it up there under an oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said unto all the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness unto us, for it hath heard all the words of the Lord that he spake unto us. It shall therefore be a witness unto you, lest ye deny your God. And you can go there today to Shechem and put your hands on the stone that Joshua set up in Shechem as a testimony to God and his provision for the Jewish people. Unfortunately, it's covered today in Palestinian. They don't even know it's graffiti. They don't even know what they have. As we left Nablus that day, we were stopped at a checkpoint going out. They pointed their guns at the Israeli soldiers, pointed their guns at us. They had the road shut down. We had to walk up, get our passports. Joel walked up there and talked our way out of the checkpoint. The young soldier, and these are young kids. They've been stabbed and killed at this checkpoint. And the Palestinians were there, about a couple dozen cars were stopped, and they were saying, just ram your car up there. Just drive your car up there and ram them. Now, it didn't make sense to me at that time, but now I think they were saying, we want to see what happens when some Americans go up there and do that, especially when your president is in the country. But the soldier said, why were you at Nablus? You shouldn't be in Nablus. It's not safe. We can't. Then Joel says, if it's not safe, let us out. And he said, why did you go there? And he said, we went to Shechem. The soldier got teary-eyed. He said, I'm an Orthodox Jew. I was born in Israel. All of my life, the one place I have wanted to go was Shechem. I can't go because I'm a Jew. Tell me about it. This is despicable, that the Jewish people are cut off from their heritage. But listen, Jesus will return. He will restore everything. That, my friends, is Israel, Bible prophecy, and you. Let's pray. Father, help us keep in mind the phenomenal, fantastic truths that you have written in the Word of God, both Testaments. Help us learn these lessons, take heart, and have our faith reaffirmed, and be moved to go and boldly share the truth of your word and the gospel of Jesus Christ to a world that is in intense chaos today. But we are blessed, as you bless the children of Israel, we are blessed with the truth and the power of the work of your Son and the Word of God. Bless us in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.